Now we're going to learn how to write a fraction into a percent. First of all, I want to write my fraction as a decimal. There are two ways how I showed you guys how to write a fraction to a decimal. One of them was by dividing, and the other one was by using the denominator, the number at the bottom. So in this case, let me use questions 9 and 11. Let me use division. I'm going to write this using division. Like I said, I showed you guys two methods, dividing and using the denominator. But now let me use division in this case. Like I said, I want this as a decimal first. I know the instructions said write it as a percent. I'm going to write it as a decimal first. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go 3 divided by 10. So I'm going to write it as a decimal first. The number on the top is what goes in the bottom, inside the house. The numerator goes inside the house. The denominator, the number at the bottom, goes outside. My answer should have a decimal point. So I'm going to put my decimal there. Then I ask myself, how many times does 10 go into 3? Well, 0 times because 10 is bigger, right? 10 times 0 is 0. When I subtract this, I get 3. Bring down the next number. After the decimal point, I have as many zeros as I need. Then I ask myself, how many times does 10 go into 30? Well, 3 times. Because 10 times 3 is 30. When I subtract this, I get 0. So my decimal is 0.3. Now, to write this as a percent, let me move my decimal place. I'm going to move it to the right 2 spaces. Add any zeros if you need in order to be able to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Right? If I add an extra 0 here, I will be able to move my decimal point 2 places to the right. And this, I'm going to write this as 30%. Get the decimal first, and then move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Let's take a look at number 11. Because I'm doing division, so I'm going to go forward divided by 5. Remember the number at the top, the numerator goes inside the house. The denominator, the number at the bottom, goes outside. My answer will have a decimal point. 5, how many times does 5 go into forward? Well, 0 times because 5 is bigger. 5 times 0 is 0. When I subtract this, I get forward. After the decimal point, I have as many zeros as I need. Right, so bring down the next number. How many times does 5 go into 40? It goes in 8 times because 8 times 5 is 40. When I subtract this, I get nothing. Now move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Add any zeros if you need. So now that I move this my decimal point 2 places to the right, I get 80%. So once again, get the decimal point first. I got my decimal point, my decimal answer by using division, and then move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Another method that I showed you guys is using the denominator. I want the number at the bottom, right? Another way how to get a decimal is I want the number at the bottom to be a 1 with zeros. So I want it to be either 10, 100, 1000, any number as long as it's 1 with zeros. What I'm going to do here, I'm looking at number 10, I can make the number at the bottom 100, right? I cannot make it 10 because if I can make it 10 by dividing by 2, but then I have to divide the top by 2 as well. In this case, I'm going to multiply it by 5. And the reason why is because 20 times 5 is 100. I want the number at the bottom to be 1 and zeros, either 10, 100, 1000, 10,000, as long as it's 1 with zeros. Now the top, 19 times 5. Let me multiply it. 19 times 5. I know 5 times 1 is 5. 9 times 5 is 45. When I add my rows, I get 95. So 19 times 5 is 95. Like I said, I wrote my denominator, the number at the bottom, as 1 and zeros. My decimal answer will have a 95 in it, right? The number on the top. The amount of zeros at the bottom tell me how many decimal places, how many numbers after the decimal point. So like I said, I wrote this as a decimal first. Now that I have the decimal part, I'm going to move my decimal point 2 places to the right. So my answer happens to be 95%. Don't forget the percent symbol. Now looking at question number 12. Remember, I want the number at the bottom to be either 10, 100, 1000, a 1 and zeros. I'm going to say, well, I'm going to multiply each by 2. And the reason why, because I get a 10 at the bottom, right? 2 times 2 on the top, that's 4. So my answer has a 4. I have one decimal place. Remember, I know how many decimal place depending on the decimal, how many zeros at the bottom. So I have one decimal place. So my answer is 0.4 as a decimal. Like I said, I wanted to write it as a decimal first. Now that I have the decimal, to write it as a percent, let me move my decimal point 2 places to the right. Add any zeros if you need to. Now, when I move this 2 places to the right, I happen to get 40%. So get the decimal first. When you're going to write a fraction as a percent, get a decimal first. There's 2 ways how you can get the decimal. Either use division, like I did in questions 9 and 11, or use the denominator, like I did in questions 10 and 12. Once you have the decimal, move the decimal point 2 places to the right. And that's how you get your percentage.